Hello, I'm Olive, and I'm here with Professor Rachel, and I'm here to talk to her, pick her brain about her 20 years of experience in graphic design.
Oh gosh, make that more like 27, Olive.
Oh goodness, really?
About that, if you count, well, before I became an instructor in colleges, I worked for 23 years in the corporate world. Most of those were doing nothing but graphic design. A couple of those were working as a director of communications. And then I became an instructor. So I kept doing graphic design, but in a different way, right? Designing projects for my students. So designing those and also doing like volunteer work for the colleges that I've worked at.
Now you say graphic design. What exactly corporations did you work for?
Corporations. Well, I worked for a lot of small startup companies when I was younger. So most of those don't exist anymore because that's kind of what happens with startups. They
Yeah.
either go out of business or someone else buys them and they morph into another company. That's what happens with a lot of successful small companies. I started out at a small advertising company called AJ Indoor Advertising. They're long gone, back in Minnesota, back in the 90s. They posted ads in restaurant bathrooms and sports bars around the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. And that was a really great boot camp kind of job because we had to work really fast and we had a color printer, instant gratification. And, in the 90s, having a color printer that could move really fast was a big deal. Now it's not quite as much. Um, After that, I went to a healthcare software services provider called HSII, and it was like I was an in house corporate graphic designer. So I spent a lot of my career being an in house corporate graphic designer at different companies. So HSII kind of folded and I sadly watched some of my friends get laid off. But the president of HSII left that company and started a new one and said, "Hey, Rachel, why don't you come along and design our stuff?" So that's what I did. And then for a short time, I lived in the Azore Islands of Portugal for 6 months, where I just did some graphic design volunteer work. And then I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area, and I worked for some tech companies during the kind of Silicon Valley .com boom and bust. So that was an interesting thing to be around for. After that, I lived in Champaign, Illinois, and worked for a sports and fitness publisher running their marketing art department. So I was managing people. And then I moved to Chicago and I worked for a company called SEI, which morphed into several other companies. And they did a lot of work for McDonald's Corporation. And so I ended up visiting McDonald's corporate headquarters and seeing their what they call Hamburger University and going to meetings in their corporate headquarters. Not a lot, just a few. And designing trade show booths for those companies' booths at their 2008 National Convention, which was held in Orlando, Florida. And that was in Chicago. And then I moved to Minnesota to be closer to family. And I worked for a company called DTN, the Progressive Farmer, that was bought out by another company called Telvent, that was later bought out by another company called Schneider Electric.
The food chain.
Exactly. So, and that in that job, I did a lot of emailers and printed marketing collateral and a little bit of trade show graphic design, and a lot of rebranding because they kept changing their brand. So it was very hard work. And that's pretty much my career before I ended up here in Northeast Pennsylvania.
Hmm. What would you say your favorite personal working experience was?
I love being a college professor. It is my favorite working experience.
Really?
I love it much more than I loved being a corporate graphic designer. But there were a lot of perks to be a corporate graphic designer, and I wouldn't be as good of an instructor as I am now, with all humility, if I hadn't had the real life experience, because I wouldn't have that to draw on and share with you guys, the students, and if I hadn't, the circumstances of my life led me to need to move a few times and I kept myself marketable and I worked in different places and that variety of experiences also helps me bring more to you guys, the students. So I'm glad that I have had the career path that I've had. Because if I would have started out in academia, I don't even know what I'd be doing. Maybe I'd be like an English teacher or something, or a journalism. But I ended up being a graphic designer, and then I felt a little cubbyholed in that role. I felt a little limited, so I went back to school and got a master's in communications, and that's what led me here basically.
Oh, well, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah. So it's kind of a general answer. I mean, if you're looking for a more specific answer, I mean,
Is there any project particular you have more fond memories of?
um, yeah, like I think I've said this to you folks in class before, but some of my favorite design projects are ones that I did as a volunteer, that were usually for a friend or a family member or for myself and a group of friends. And so the best example of that is back around 2000, what was it? I think it was 2005. Um, I lived in the Chicago area and I was involved in theater. And a group of my girlfriends from theater and I decided we wanted to produce a play, put it on and star in it and hire the director and do all the stuff. And so we did. The play was called Five Women Wearing the Same Dress. And it's about a group of bridesmaids, basically. And I designed everything for that. And so I designed like the main poster for it, and really, one day I just got this idea, just came to me for the concept for the poster. Um, and I thought it would be like a woman wearing like a cool dress, but like backless, so her back showed. And I called up another girlfriend. I said, "Can you come over and do a photo shoot in my apartment? And can you bring your cigarettes?" Because I thought she should have a cigarette because people smoke in the play. And I had her write on my back the title of the play in lipstick. And I went to the store and I bought some flowers, so I'd have like a bouquet of flowers. So it was very, very creative and really fun. Kind of like, even like I was telling you guys earlier in class, right? You have to kind of think outside the box, right, to build your ideas. Don't just stare at computers or stare at a piece of paper. Like, explore and go get stuff and do stuff and build stuff. Make your projects 3D, in a lot of ways. Um, so that was one of my favorite design experiences and one of my favorite artistic experiences because it also combines something else that I really love, which is acting and theater.
Interesting. So, base one of your biggest things so far is like definitely get out there and experience life. You would say
Definitely.
you never
Yep.
know how much it would impact your work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've lived in a lot of different places and had a lot of different experiences, and yeah, just get out there and do stuff because it'll give more depth and substance to the projects you end up doing.
Now, here's another question: have you ever had the bizarre experience of finding something you worked on in the wild, as it were?
Oh, I think I get what you're saying. Hmm. Not really, but like what can be fun is when I did all that trade show stuff. So I told you when I worked in the Chicago area, I started out working for a company called SEI, and they needed a rebrand. So I did their logo. And then they started two or three other new companies, VSI, Wygomi, and Verity. I designed all their logos, and almost all of them had trade show stuff. And so I would see my stuff on trade show swag, right? Like, because I water bottles with a logo I designed, a shirt with a logo I designed, a big old trade show booth. I actually went to that convention in Florida. Um, they actually snuck me in because the tickets cost like $900 a person.
And the
But so I just wore someone else's name tag, but there, because I happened to be going to Florida for another reason, oddly enough. It's kind of like it's meant to be. Like, okay, the universe is saying, "Oh, Rachel, you get to see your work. We're gonna arrange this for you." So yeah, I went to it was like by Disneyland and everything. So it was a really fun experience. Like, so corporate will bring you a lot of experience. There's a lot of good money in corporate. I don't want to knock corporate, right? It's there's a lot of perks and a lot of good security and benefits and all that. But what am I trying to say? So that's kind of one version of seeing my stuff in the wild, is just seeing people wearing it, which is really cool. Another thing is, several years back, I worked with one of the classes I taught, to design the logo and some other stuff for this organization that's in Wyoming, Pennsylvania. I think it's called Reaching Beyond Limits, and it's an adult day program for individuals with autism spectrum disorder and intellectual disabilities. And so we designed their logo and did all this stuff for them. And somebody just randomly came across one of their business cards and gave it to me, like, oh, I met such and such, and she gave me her card. And I had never seen the logo on an actual business card. So that's just kind of fun too. Like it's comes full circle. But never anything too crazy. Like I didn't go hiking and see a frog wearing a t-shirt with my logo on it,
Now that would be an experience.
Yeah, it would, yeah.
Now here's another. Actually, I'll edit that out.
You're fine, you're fine.
One more question though to
Mhm.
wrap things up. You've already said definitely made it clear that one of the best experiences you can have is get experience.
Mhm.
But are there any other like things you wish you could tell yourself when you just started your career?
Um, yeah, I would say um don't beat yourself up if everything's not as perfect as you want it to be. And because everyone makes mistakes, they're inevitable. When I was younger, it seemed like, at least in my 20s, every new job I would get, or I can think of two anyway, there'd be a moment, the crying moment. Something would happen, and I'd be like, oh my God, I made a horrible mistake, and I'd go home and cry. And I didn't need to. I did a good job, and everybody has their days when not everything goes right. And maybe it is your fault, quote unquote, because you're not experienced yet. You have to, some lessons you can only learn by making a mistake and then doing it right the next time. So, yeah, I would tell myself, hey, take it easy. Nobody's going to fire you if you make one mistake, even if it's a bad, embarrassing mistake, which it never really was, but, you know, but yeah, I was a little too hard on myself. So I would say, take it easy on yourself and just know experience is the best teacher
All right. Well,
besides me.
naturally. Well, here.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you. It was fun.
No problem. Have a wonderful day.
All right. You too.
Thank you.
Bye, TV Land.